Alright, so this is 2.8 part 2. So again, we're graphing inequalities, and today we're graphing absolute value inequalities. What does an absolute value graph look like? Come on guys, we did this in 2.6. What does an absolute value graph look like? Anytime you see absolute values in your equation, it's always positive, but what does the graph look like? Nope.
It's kind of weird, isn't it? Yeah.
They always have the same shape. What shape is that? A V. They always have the shape of a V. Okay. So just like how when we graphed our lines in part 1, the same thing happens for our absolute values, but now we have V's instead of just lines, so this would be a dashed V. If it is just less than or greater than, if we have that equal to, it'll be a solid V. So same thing when we had our lines. We have dashed if it's just less than or greater than. If it has that equal to, it's solid. So let's look at our example. In the last section, on your quiz, we graphed y is equal to the absolute value of x minus 4. What do we have to do first to graph this? We're going to...
You have to subtract, subtract something. You subtract, it's not good. You subtract.
So we need to plug in numbers to figure out what our graph is going to do so we can graph this. How do we find out what numbers to plug in?
Subtract something minus x minus 1.
So we always set what's in the absolute value equal to 0. So we have x is equal to 0. Here we don't have to do anything to solve. So 0 is going to be the middle number that we plug in. Is this coming back to you?
Oh.
Okay. Then we need one number smaller and one number bigger. So we can do -1, 0, and 1. So now we're going to plug it into our equation. We have the absolute value of -1 minus 4. What's the absolute value of -1?
1.
Positive 1. So then what's positive 1 minus 4? -3. So then our point here is -1, -3. So we go to our graph, go to the left 1 and down 3. Put a point there. Now we're going to plug in 0. So we have 0 minus 4 is -4. So this is 0, -4. So we stay on 0, go down to -4. Put a point there. Now we plug in 1. So we have the absolute value of 1 minus 4. This is -3. So what's our point here? If we plugged in 1 for x and got -3, what would our point be? 1, -3. So we go to the right 1 and down 3. So when we have just an equal to sign, we would connect our 3 points with a V. Now it's either going to be a solid line or a dotted line. So this tells us that it is a solid line. Perfect. So we connect our dots with a solid line. Now, just like how we had to pick a point and shade for our lines, we're doing the same thing here. We want to pick a point inside of our V, and that'll help us determine where we're going to shade. So anytime that 0, 0 is in your V, you're going to pick this point. So we're going to plug in 0, 0. So this means we plug in 0 for x and 0 for y. So 0 is greater than or equal to 0 minus 4. What's 0 minus 4? 0 minus 4. Negative 4. Is 0 greater than or equal to negative 4?
Yes.
Yes. Since this is true, we shade on the inside. So we're going to shade everything in here.
Not the x.
All right. So again, we are going to graph it first. So we have y is equal to 2 times the absolute value of x plus 3. We need to plug in our numbers to see what our graph's going to do. So how do we find what we're going to plug in for x? Before that. What did we do for the last one? How did we find? So we set what's inside of the bars here equal to 0. So x is equal to 0. So if we had things going on in here, like x plus 2, then we would have to subtract and find what x is. But here, we just have an x all by itself, so we set it equal to 0, x is equal to 0. This is our middle number. What's our first number going to be? Just any number smaller, and we need any number bigger. So negative 1, 0, and 1. So now let's plug them in. We have 2 times the absolute value of negative 1 plus 3. What's the absolute value of negative 1? So 2 times 1 plus 3. What's 2 times 1? 2. And 2 plus 3? 5. So when we plugged in negative 1, we got 5. What is our point here? Negative 1, 5. So we go to the left 1 and up 5. Now we plug in 0. So we have 2 times the absolute value of 0 plus 3. What's 2 times the absolute value of 0? 0. And 0 plus 3? 3. So we plugged in 0 and got 3. What's our point? 0, 3. So we stay on 0, go up 3. Next, we plug in 1. So 2 times the absolute value of 1 plus 3. This is 2 plus 3, which is 5. So what's our point? 1, 5. So we go to the right 1 and up 5. Do we connect our dots with a solid line or a dotted line? Solid line. So we have a solid V here. Now we need to plug in a point. What point can we plug in? We can plug in 0, 0, but just know that 0, 0 is outside of our V. So if it works, then we're shading outside of the V. But yeah, we can plug in 0, 0. So we're going to plug in 0 for x and 0 for y. So we have 0 is less than or equal to 2 times the absolute value of 0 plus 3. What's 2 times the absolute value of 0 plus 3? What's 2 times 0? And what's 0 plus 3? Is 0 less than or equal to 3? Is it? Yeah. So then we shade where that 0, 0 is, which is outside. So here we are graphing y is greater than or equal to 3 times the absolute value of x plus 1. So now we need to plug in numbers. How do we decide what numbers we're going to plug in? Yeah, for x. How do we decide what numbers we're plugging in for x? What do we set equal to 0? What do we set equal to 0 to decide what numbers we plug in? Anybody? How do we decide what numbers we're going to put in here? Not x. So we take what's inside of our bars here. We always take what's inside of the absolute value and set that equal to 0. So x plus 1 is equal to 0. So subtract 1 on both sides. X is equal to negative 1. This number goes in the middle. So you always just take what's inside here and set it equal to 0. What are 2 other numbers going to be? Negative 2 and 0. So we need one number smaller, one number bigger. Alright, now we can plug in. So we have 3 times the absolute value of negative 2 plus 1. What is negative 2 plus 1?
Negative 1.
What's the absolute value of negative 1? 1. And then, so what's 3 times 1? 3. So what's our point here? Negative 2, 3. We go to our graph. We go to the left 2 and up 3. Put our point there. Next we plug in negative 1. So we have 3 times negative 1 plus 1 in our absolute value. What is negative 1 plus 1? 0. So 3 times the absolute value of 0 is what? 0. So what's our point here? Negative 1, 0. So we go to the left one and stay on 0. Next we plug in 0. So we have 3 times the absolute value of 0 plus 1. 0 plus 1 is 1. So 3 times the absolute value of 1 is what?
3.
3. So then what's our point here? 0, 3. So we stay on 0, go up 3. Is this going to have a dotted line or a solid line? A solid line, since it has that equal to below it, it's a solid line. So we draw our solid V there. And now we need to plug in a point to test. What can we plug in? Sure, let's plug in 0, 0. So just remember that 0, 0 is on the outside of our V. So we're going to plug in 0 for x and 0 for y. So we have 0 is greater than or equal to 3 times the absolute value of 0 plus 1. What is 0 plus 1? 1. So then what's 3 times the absolute value of 1? 3. So is 0 greater than or equal to 3? No. So this is not true. Where are we going to shade? Inside. We shade where the 0, 0 is not, so we shade on the inside. Awesome. Good job, guys. All right, last example. So here we have y minus 6. Yep. Y minus 6 is greater than the absolute value of x. Or is less than, my bad. How do we find what numbers we're going to plug in here? What do? So we set what's inside of our absolute value equal to 0. So what's our middle number in here? 0. Negative 1 and 1. Perfect. Now we're going to plug in negative 1 to our equation. So we have y minus 6. We change this to an equals when we're solving for our points. So y minus 6 is equal to the absolute value of negative 1. So I'm just doing the math down here so you can see it. What is the absolute value of negative 1? 1. Now how do we find what y is here? How do we solve for y? We want y equals all by itself. Add 6 on both sides. Perfect. So y is equal to 7. So what would be our point here? Negative 1, 7. So let's go to our graph. We're going to go to the left 1 and up 7. Put a point there. Now we plug in 0. So we have y minus 6 is equal to the absolute value of 0. What's the absolute value of 0? 0. So then how do we solve for y? Add 6. So then our point is 0, 6. So we stay on 0, go up 6. Okay, lastly, we're going to plug in 1. Y minus 6 is equal to the absolute value of 1. What's the absolute value of 1? 1. So then how do we solve for y? Add 6. Y is equal to 7. So what's our point here? 1, 7. So go to the right 1, up 7. Are we going to have a dotted line or a solid line here? A dotted line. Since it's just less than, we have a dotted V. What do we do next? What do? Plug in a point. What point can we plug in? Sure, let's plug in 0, 0. 0, 0 is outside of our V, so we just got to keep that in mind. So you plug in 0 for x and 0 for y. So 0 minus 6 is less than the absolute value of 0. What is 0 minus 6? And what's the absolute value of 0? So is negative 6 less than 0? Yes. So where are we going to shade? The outside. So we shade where that 0, 0 is. We're shading on the outside.